Sabbat The Black Hand. It's a book, and they've released a preview for it. And I've read through it, and I think it's pretty cool. There is an example of the paths. There is a little bit of lore about what's going on. I think that it's very telling that plans have changed behind the scenes, because instead of going, let's send all the vampires to the Middle East, they just put one line in here that's like, actually, they're all over the world. Secret vampires all over the world fighting. And I like all the work they do to make the Sabbat in this book fucked up. They're proper creepy. So the Path of Cain is a belief and like a drive. I think the cut and thrust of the Path of Cain is like, if you put one of these NPCs in your campaign, then you should make it abundantly clear that if the players piss them off or just do something that interests them a bit too much, they're at risk of getting diablerized and eaten, which I think is a good ever-present threat to have. If you're like, who are these folks? And they're just like, you know what? I love being closer to God. And I can get closer to God through you. I thought that was interesting. That was one question I had, which is, are the vampires being beckoned for the Sabbat vampires? And I guess yes, because technically they're no different from any other vampire, except they're a terrifying death cult. But they're also, there's a bit in here about some vampires are being beckoned because they're either really powerful or really old in the Sabbat. And then there's their lackeys and the other people who follow them. They're just like, this sounds like a good time. Yeah, a bunch of them follow the people that are being beckoned because they're like, wow, old vampires? Yummy. The description of what it's like to be in a place controlled by the Sabbat, it's like, there's not a lot of vampires, partly because they kill everyone, partly because the Second Inquisition kill everyone, but also sometimes there's lots of vampires because they turn lots of people and then use them as foot soldiers, which I think is very, very useful information to have in a very short 3 paragraphs. Your theory is most antediluvians are in Cradle of Civilization. Yes. Well, it actually describes here war affects more territory than the Camarilla and Anarchs suspect. It isn't confined to the Cradle of Civilization, where the original and most ancient vampires held sway. It does make sense that the whole Cradle of Civilization idea linking vampires to not only the diaspora of humans and where they originated and civilizations and empires grew initially, but then also vampires followed them, and it would track that also the oldest vampires would follow them because either they're leading them somewhere or they're getting forced out or all sorts of things, like normal human things, which I think is really interesting. It gives you lots of canvas on which to paint your history of what you as a storyteller or you as a player think vampires could have done in the past because they're very old. And if it's even the antediluvians, like the first ever vampires at all, that's for you to decide. They're mentioning them in a lot in this, I think, not because it definitely is, like they're saying, this is the one and true law that you have to follow. They're mentioning it because the Sabbat are like dedicated to a war against these first vampires who they ideologically despise. Yeah, I like that they've not organized, they seem to be reorganizing the Sabbat not into clans, because, you know, the first vampires are the people that the clans come from. This is the they organize them into the paths, or that's how it's hopefully gonna look. So people that are all Path of Cain are likely to look like this. Like, these are the disciplines that they're likely to have. This is how they're likely to act and what they want. So it's really useful stuff, and it's very handily laid out to spark ideas for storytellers. Because this is going to be like a monster manual. There's a difference between here's the lore and here's what the Sabbat believe. Yes. Leaving more space for people to create the games that they want to play is a brilliant way that they've set up the 5th edition vampire lore that they write. It's like, here's one specific vampire's letters to another specific vampire. Here's what they say, which means that's what they believe. It's not reliable. But if you want to use it or make like part of that true or none of it true, it's just a big lie. Or it's just they've been misled. Or there's so many possibilities for you to use that in interesting ways. Because I know when I'm reading through a TTRPG rulebook, I don't go, yes, I am going to use every single word of this particular lore dump. I go, oh, here's an interesting idea from this single sentence, and thus spawns an entire campaign. I don't know what this is. Like, this entire section here is an entirely different path, but it's smaller. So I guess when we'll see when the full thing comes out, but are they doing like small interesting bits about different paths in addition to larger sections, or is it just this is an example of how this particular path would start out an NPC? What I'm hoping is that for each path, it's this entire spiel about what they believe, what their powers are, how they will act, that sort of thing, and then a smaller piece of bit stuff like this about how you would stat them out and how they act. Because this one's not about what the Path of Death and Soul Piper believe. This is how an NPC would act. Yeah, so we got some cool shit here with the Path of Death and the Soul Piper, and just having a creepy necromancer hanging around that collects ghosts and then sends them after the people that have wronged them is terrifying. And I love that as an idea for an NPC. Like, this is the most bare bones idea, but having a description of what they're doing instead of who they are and what their name is and what their backstory is way more interesting to me as a storyteller. Then you can put some clothes and a hat on those bare bones, maybe some skin and flesh and guts. Protean power of terror. Protean blood sorcery combination power of terror. So visceral absorption, I'm assuming they've statted, like, organize them like this because this is how player powers are. So players are going to be able to use them. Will they want to? I don't know. How often do you want to rip the blood out of all the bodies near you and use it to feed yourself? That's up to you. But you can, and it has an exact system for how the rolls work and everything. The user states 1 hunger per body. Like, it's not even that effective, but it is terrifying. Just being a vortex is just like casually, as the user becomes a literal vortex of blood and viscera, vampire remains unaffected. It's extremely overt. This is not a power that someone who's trying to hide would use. So yeah, this power is beautifully fucked up. It's also different from the power described in the news section of the World of Darkness stream, where Justin Achille, one of the writers and editors, was like, yeah, there's this power you can use where you suck the blood that you've given to other people to you. So I don't know whether this is a redesign of it or just Additionally, you can also suck blood from people near you if they're dead. You're terrified of your players having a way to clean up their messes. Is this a way to clean up? It's only really a way to clean up if you can hide the fact that you've caused several corpses. If you can explain away the fact that you were swirling with like a drain plug of blood. The bodies turn to ash? Yes. But who's to say that the bodies that got there in the first place aren't drawing a shit ton of attention? And you got to make sure there's no cameras. Like, this is risky. And also, if you play a kata, there's actually a thing that you can use to make a body disappear anyway. So hiding bodies ain't too bad. I like the description of how the bodies disappear, actually. You are right. Who gets protean and blood sorcery? People who eat a lot of people get protean and blood sorcery. The state of the body is of no significance as long as it's fresh. Even somebody, in quotes, who remains a little more than red smear will be consumed. Literally cleans all the blood off of out of a carpet. It's brilliant. The surrounding area is left remarkably clean, and the Sabbat are able to employ it. Now, where's the thing about a greasy smear? Like, I don't know. There's this bit where it's like, I'm not reading this whole thing, but the body turns into a greasy cloud of dust. What's the back say? An antagonist's guide to the cultic fanatics of the Sabbat. It contains descriptions of Paths of Enlightenment, the foundations of Sabbat identity, information on the Gehenna War, new tools to expand your chronicles, discipline powers, antagonists, and the Rite of the Black Hand. Yes, I was a messy eater, but damn is my makeup on point.